Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here, and welcome back to another installment of What Would Kelly Make? This is the full card video. Those were just a little snapshot of the parcels I had to choose from, and I ended up choosing the Gerda Steiner Designs Llama Toyu, which is the stamp set as well as the dies. And so for the technique this time around, we're actually going to be talking about perspective. I get a lot of questions about how I stamp one layer cards, or what needs to go first, or how to build the scene. So I thought that it would be a good something for maybe us to look at. So first things first, I'm using a T-square ruler to just give myself kind of a little bit of a boundary, because I thought that it would be cute to have my scene just have like a white frame around it. And then we're going to get into the stamping. So when you're building a scene, the first thing that you want to look at is the size of your stamps. So the bigger an object is, the closer it appears to be. So in this set, there's 3 llamas. One is just the head, which is very large, which is the stamp set I'm using right now. And then there's a medium and a small. But because of the way that we're going to build the scene, they're all going to look like they could be the same size. So I have this guy kind of like just poking up his head, which is super cute. So I stamped him down and masked him, and then I'm going to start building the rest of the scene. This little grassy hill is included in the set. I wanted to keep my boundaries nice and clean, so I'm just using a regular old Post-it note to kind of block those off so you don't get any over stamping. And then I'm going to go in with the medium-sized llama. This is the next largest llama. So if you were looking at a scene where all of these llamas were standing on these hills, he would appear to be the next largest. And then you can kind of manipulate the way things look. So for the last llama, which I'm going to go ahead and stamp the hills and then stamp the llama. But for the last one, he's very small. Now, if I stamped the medium one next to the small one, you could tell the one was smaller than the other. But because of the way that we're building up this scene where one is going to be further away, they're going to appear like they could be the same size, and one is just further off in the distance, which is really what I want when I'm building my scene. Now, you could want one that is smaller than the other, and that's totally fine if that's the scene that you're going for. But I just wanted to show you a way to build your scenes using the stamps. You know, I'm sure usually with stamp sets there's multiple images and multiple sizes for a lot of times, especially if it's specific to a certain animal or theme, like this one is to llamas. Though I will tell you there's like little armadillos in this set, which are also totally adorable. So then I'm going to move on to stamping and building up the scenery. So I'm going to stamp this cacti, which I'm stamping it in its full size. So next to that smaller llama, it looks like a very large cactus. Like even from here, it's very large, where this one is very tiny. And so from far, it looks like it's much further away in the distance and much smaller. Now, like I was talking about how you can manipulate your stamps. So here, I'm going to use that same large cacti, but I am going to use it, and I'm only going to stamp half of it. And then for this cactus, I'm going to stamp it further up from the hill. And then because it's a simple shape, I can just extend those lines, and it's going to give the appearance that this cactus is actually larger than it is. So just keep your eye out for things like that you can kind of use to just really reinforce this perspective that you're trying to have. So the largest llama in the front, I'm actually going to pop him up after I'm going to die or stamp him a separate time and then die cut him out. So I'm not really concerned about coloring him, but I am going to do the rest of the scene as just one layer. So this is, I'm sure you noticed, probably a longer video, but there is lots of Copic coloring, and I don't typically show you all of my stamping and masking. So just kind of bear with me, skip the parts that you want to skip. So here I wanted there to be something in the background. I almost lost it right there, and you'll see me take off this other cap, and the reason is because I don't use this marker a ton, and it almost bled out onto my paper. So I was getting some pooling. I happened to get lucky that it was in an area that it didn't get on anything else that would not be purple, but if that happens to you where your marker tip is oversaturated, just pop the top off the other end, and it usually will equalize the ink that's in it until you use enough ink that that's not a problem anymore. Anywho, I wanted there to be like a little bit of a mountain range in the background since we're kind of in like this little desert scene. So I used a darker purple on the bottom, and then I went over just the middle and added some to the top portion of the light purple. And this is just general mountain shapes. You can see I didn't add any detail. Right now it just looks like a big purpley blob. But by the time we're done, it will look like it's a mountain range off in the distance. So we're going to move on to the sky. I am using just kind of light flicking motions. I'm trying to leave some white areas, which will be clouds. Again, these are just very general shapes, and it looks kind of blobby. It's okay. It's going to get better. So typically the horizon is, your sky is going to be a little bit darker the higher it goes up. So I'm adding most of my shading there. For my darkest color, I'm really just adding it right directly to the top. And then I'm just going to go through and kind of blend everything out, still using those kind of flicking motions so that everything blends really well together. And then I wasn't loving the way that the B21 was blending into the white. I know that I have this problem, and I know a lot of other people do too. Copics are darker when they're wet, and so they don't look like they blend as well. And so we keep wanting to go over them, and then we end up over blending them. So just make sure you give it a minute to dry before you really decide that you don't love it and that you want to try blending over it. So mine, I still did feel like needed to be blended, and so I just brought in a B000, which is super light. And then once it dried back, like you couldn't even see that B000. So now we're going to move on to the grass. The part of the reason why I picked the purple for the mountain range is because I knew that this card was going to be a lot of brown and green, and I wanted there to be some other colors. So I'm going to go in with my lightest color and fill in all of the hillsides. All of the grass is all just going to be this same light green color, and then we're going to start adding in some detail, especially to the hills that are in the front, and then we'll add a couple of other colors into the hills that are in the back. So here I'm just trying to get like a medium-ish, just kind of some coverage. I'm leaving the lightest area on the hills, just on the very tippy top. That would be where my highlight is. And I'm trying to pay attention to where the lines overlap for the hills and add a little bit of shading there. And then with my next darkest color, I'm going to go in and start adding the blades of grass. On the hill that is closest to us, that would have the most detail. And I'm using those same flicking motions that I use to color any other object, except now this time I'm using them to create the grass. I'm not going all the way up because I want to conserve that highlight. But I am adding it to where the hills would overlap each other, and then the bottom portion of the card, I'm going to go back in with the mid-tone and just go right over top of them. I'm still going to have some light from when I put down the original colored areas, and that's good because grass has variation, so you're going to want those different colors and the way that they lay together. The hills in the back will have less definition, and in order to get more depth, what I did was the darkest part of it, which would be directly behind the first set of hills, I started with brown. And you're not really going to be able to see a ton of it after we're done, so don't be terribly nervous about it. They'll blend. It'll work. So I'm putting in the darkest brown, and then I'm going to go in with a medium brown just a little higher up. The part that would be the lightest, moving towards the top of the hills, I'm just going to have green. But the bottoms, I needed there to be something that was going to differentiate the two. I need something to make it darker. So I'm just going to go right over top of that, just like the green I did with the first set of hills. But you can see that because it's darker, it is set back. I didn't want the cacti to be the same color as the grass. I wanted them to be a little bit different. But this YG06 is clearly way too bright for the color scheme that I have going on here. It just looks kind of cartoonish and like it doesn't fit, but the colors you use first create really great undertones. So don't be afraid to go in with a brighter color and then tone it back with some shading. So here I went in with that really, really bright color, and now I'm going to go in with the mid-tone from my grass and I'm going to add shading to the left hand and bottom sides of the cacti. And then because I have that, just that little sliver of green as my highlight, and then also the bright green as my undertone, it gives them the appearance of a different green than what I have on my grasses, and just because I did my base a different color. So in order to incorporate that purple in a little more, I colored the flowers on my cactus purple, and then I just added a little teeny tiny bit of shading with the same purple I did in the mountain range. And then now we are finally to the llamas. So the llama up front, I told you I'm going to cut out and pop up. I'm not even concerned about him. I just did a really quick layer of E40 so that he isn't stark white if someone happens to peep beneath my Scotch foam tape. The middle llama is the one we're going to be doing the majority of showing the color on. So I gave him a good healthy coat of my lightest color. Now I'm going to go in with the next darkest, and llamas, when I looked at their pictures, typically their faces are smooth. So I'm not really doing any texture on his face, but on the parts that are bumped up, on the furry parts, I'm doing what they call stippling. Stippling is just a series of dots that you use to give shading. So the dots are more condensed where they're darker, and they're more scattered where they're lighter. And you can see it really well once we get to the E44. And then I'm also adding some shading underneath his, where it's the most furry, so on his little legs, and then his hooves as well. We'll get that. So here you can see the little dots much better with the E44. And because I color with my light source in the top right hand corner, the majority of my shading is going to be to the bottom of the objects and to the left. So here you can see that's how I'm adding it, because this particular llama would be looking into the sun. So his shading would be on the left hand side, the sun's going to be hitting him on the right. And I did the same thing. I added those little dots, and now I'm going to work my way back out to the lightest color, so everything just kind of blends. And even though it's just dots, I mean, it's just dots, folks. That's it. Just up and down, dot, dot, dot. It really gives the appearance that he is furry and fluffy and very full. And so it's a nice little trick to have in your arsenal. I'm going to use the darkest color just on his hooves and his nose, and then I'm going to use them for the hooves of the llama that's up on the highest hill. Him, I decided to make a darker colored llama, and because the light source is to his back, his face, the front of his chest, and underneath his belly are going to be where his dark areas are. And for this one, I just started right in with the stippling with the darkest color. I didn't have a problem with it. I didn't feel like I was too heavy-handed. So you just do whatever works for you. If starting with the darkest color works for you, do that. Starting with the lightest color works for you, do that. There isn't a wrong way. So I'm giving that shading on his face where it would be smooth, and then I'm doing the stippling in the areas to just kind of blend them together. That one has almost no E40 on it because I wanted him to be darker. Most of what his lightest color is an E42. And this is just, it's a good, cool brown. It doesn't have a ton of warmth in it, but it doesn't have as little as like an E70. So I basically just feel like it's a super good neutral brown. So if you're looking for neutral, look into the 40 series. So now here's this other llama that I have stamped, and I'm going to die cut him out. I'm positive that I didn't say I'm working on Nina 80-pound cardstock. So anyway, I'm using some light pinks for his tongue, and then his texture is going to be just a little bit different. So I'm giving him, again, the once over with the E40, being careful about his little eyeballs, because I don't want them to be colored, I want them to be white. And I'm being also very careful kind of about my edges, because when I cut this out with the die, I will have a white border. So when I do him, I am going to use the stippling just on that little tuft of hair that's on the top of his head. But when I do the kind of the rest of his face is going to be smooth. So I'm just going to add regular, smooth feathered shading like I normally would. But his neck, when I Googled, because I'd never colored a llama before, folks. I had to figure it out. So I Googled it and looked at all the llamas. And there's so many llamas. There's light llamas, dark llamas, spotted llamas, crazy llama, all the llamas. But some of them are very shaggy around their necks. And so that particular texture of hair is a longer style animal. So as I was adding the shading, again, all my shading is to the left because my light source is in the right. I'm using long flicking motions. And I'm just kind of toying around with it, where I want the shading to be. I think a lot of times we watch people on YouTube or we see things on Instagram or photos of a card and we're like, oh my goodness, I could never. That's not true. You can. You just have to be willing to work and rework what you have in practice. Here, I wasn't happy with his shading. I went through, I thought, okay, I'm done. And then I was like, no, he should be darker on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to go back in. I'm just going to keep working it. As long as your paper isn't pilling up, you're fine. You just keep adding it until you're happy with the results that you have. There's no card police that's going to come and be like, you took too long to make this card, or you're only allowed to put 4 coats of Copics on this. Just do whatever you need to do to be happy with the things that you have. So I moved some of the shading over a little bit. I felt like that just gave me more of the look I was going for. And then I blended that out again with the E42. I'm going to go in and start adding the details now to my background. So I went in with a white gel pen and I started making, I'm not even kidding you, completely random lines over my cacti. These white lines will serve as the needles that are coming off the different cacti, and it's just going to be a nice little detail that's just going to bring your card to life. I always outline all of my images. If you're going to do any die cutting, please do the outlining before you die cut, because otherwise you're going to be chasing that thing all around your desk and you'll be really sad about it. Just ask me how I know. So I outline that with my EK Success writing pen, and then I'm going to go ahead and adhere my card panel to my card base, because the sentiment that I want to use is actually going to be kind of like 2-part. So the front of it is going to say Llama Tell You, and I am going to be stamping that in Simon Says black ink. So I'm going to go ahead and stamp that down, and then I'm going to use that same pen that I used to outline with to add 3 little dots so that they'll know it's a continuation. And on the inside, I'm going to stamp the rest of the sentiment, which is how much I like you. They also have one in there, which I think is totally adorable, that says, you are weird and I love it. And I just think that this little guy would be so totally adorable with the you're weird and I love it, because he just looks just like he's a little off, like, you know, he's the good time at the party. But anyway, so once I was done die cutting that, I went ahead and popped that up on some Scotch foam tape, just so he looks like he's popping out like from the frame that we have on the card. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. I did kind of have to toy around with it to get it to cover the llama that I previously stamped and still stay in the boundary. So if you kind of recreate this card, make sure you pay attention to that. So that is the entire card. I hope that you learned some stuff about perspective and about building those scenes, and just, you know, trying to work with the stamp sets that you have. So thank you so much for joining me. I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.